You're listening to the Big Ear Podcast and a Hooded Warbler.
He was charming. I was charmed that he wanted to show some interest in something that I'm clearly interested in. I guess Ethan decided that I passed some sort of test and he wanted to see me again.
We spent 3 days at that birding festival. When I came home, I was hooked.
Part of my interest in doing a big year was traveling. I hadn't been very far west in the country, and I was looking forward to seeing places I hadn't seen.
And then on the 30th of December, I got a call saying there's a stellar sea eagle in Georgetown, Maine, the rarest bird probably ever seen in Maine. Honestly, I think we were shooting for maybe 600 birds for the year using this approach, and we were going to stop and see the world's biggest ball of twine while we drove.
We got off the plane in Phoenix, drove to a botanical park, and got 2 rare birds in the same tree.
We both would listen to each other's opinion, then I'd do whatever Ingrid said.
Happy Canada Day! It's July 1st, 2025, and for most people it's a holiday and a chance to barbecue, picnic, and get away from the house and watch or set off fireworks after dark. For birders, those poor souls that have to work for a living during the week, it's a day to celebrate birds and go birding with friends, family, or just get away on your own and listen to the summer breeding birds in a quiet park, forest, or glen. As I am doing, I'm sitting on a quiet bench in Long Point, Ontario at the Long Point Bird Banding Demonstration Station here at what they call the Old Cut, not far from Long Point Provincial Park. Since last we visited, a lot has gone on in the birding world here in Southwestern Ontario. Yes, I have yet to see a Wilson's Warbler, but hopefully fall migration will bring one my way. Aside from that, the last month has been good to me. I saw a Laughing Gull, an Ontario lifer in Toronto, and Sue and I found and listened to an Acadian Flycatcher in the oddly named Skunk's Misery. The other amazing happening has been the eruption of American White Pelicans that have refused to fly north and west to their breeding grounds. They've been spotted all over southwestern Ontario. Big news, however, for me, was 9 of those pelicans visiting us where I live in Brantford. They first appeared on the Grand River at Waterworks Park, only minutes from my home. And happily, at least for us, this batch of perhaps bachelor pelicans has stuck around and may, verily, spend the summer with us on the Grand. I only added 11 birds to my year list in June, many of those I should have seen during migration, but not that stinker, the Wilson's Warbler. Look, I can understand missing a worm-eating warbler, and yes, I confess I missed that one too, but for Audubon's sake, really, one of the easiest spring warblers, the bright yellow bird with the black yarmulke, described by ornithologist Alexander Wilson in 1911. And it's a bird that seems to have little fear of people as it hunts bugs and such on the outside of branches like dogwoods in the spring. So yeah, am I bitter? Heck yeah. Okay, take a deep breath. Center yourself. Breathe. It's just one bird. It's not like I missed a brown pelican. Oh yeah, a brown pelican showed up in the Niagara region this past Monday. I raced to Niagara-on-the-Lake, searched the buoy that had been seen on, but the heat haze made it impossible to be sure of what I was looking at. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. By the time I was able to see the buoy clearly in the afternoon after the heat haze had lifted, the brown pelican was long gone. But missed opportunities lead to future celebrations when you finally do see a bird you've been chasing all summer long. Your patience and mine may one day be rewarded. And now, on with the show. My guests are a birding couple from Maine, Ingrid and Ethan Whitaker. Ethan set the record for a Maine big year on his own, and then Ingrid got into the big year spirit so they could see the country, maybe see 600 species of birds, and for some reason, a giant ball of twine. They weren't chasing any records, but were more successful than they ever imagined when they set out on their lower 48 big year. Enough of me. Let's let Ethan and Ingrid tell the rest of the story. And there they are. Hello. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you. Can you see us?
I can see you and hear you.
Wow.
How about that? That's technology working for the first time on my podcast. You seem like a pretty technical kind of guy.
We're a bit nerdy in this house.
You were the birder first and you're not the nerdy one?
Okay, the tech nerd maybe. I'm not the tech nerd. He's the tech nerd.
So big years in both the lower 48 and in Maine. And as I've often joked with people who are couples who get together because of birding, their first date is often somewhere like a garbage dump looking for gulls. And
And you do have an interesting first date story, which is almost similar to that, but a little colder, I think.
It was a real disaster, actually, but it was a second date. You want to tell it?
Oh, just we had finished dinner on our first date, and I guess Ethan decided that I passed some sort of test and he wanted to see me again, and figured a good way to get me to agree was to bring birds into it. And he said, I know this place where there's snowy egrets. And I thought, this is February, but okay, maybe he knows something I don't. And I was interested in spending some more time with him. So I said, okay. And the next weekend, he took me to Horse Mountain, and where's that, Pittsburgh?
Yeah, Georgetown. Yeah.
Along the coast, and went to this spot where he was sure there were snowy egrets, and there was snow, but no snowy egrets.
6 inches of snow,
but no egrets. There were snow egrets.
Egrets had been there just 4 months before. I don't understand this.
Were you questioning his ability to identify birds?
Oh, I knew he wasn't really all that much of a birder, but he was charming. I was charmed that he wanted to show some interest in something that I clearly interested in. It all worked out.
How many years ago was this?
Yeah, 12 years ago, February of 2013.
We were in our early teens.
You don't look a day over 22, so yes.
Thank you very much. There we go. We start the piling on. No, I say dragged me, but I was willing to go to a birding festival after we'd been dating about 5 months. And when we went to the birding festival, I had no idea what a whirl was. But we spent 3 days at that birding festival. When I came home, I was hooked.
So now you've gone to this festival, and once you realized that, wow, there's more to birds than the sparrows and the gulls and everything and the missing snowy egrets.
We just started doing a lot of birding, going places. And we went to Texas in migration season for a week. And that was eye-opening. And then we started taking a lot of vacations to birding locations. We became more and more crazy about it. Ingrid was a little, what have I created?
Yeah, I never was a lister.
At some point, though, you did see a big ear. Were you already together for a few years, and it was just something you decided to rent?
No, Ethan had seen it actually before we met and thought it was a cool story, and I hadn't heard of it, and he showed it to me, and I thought, oh, that's a fun movie. I was into the rom-com aspect of it, but in terms of doing a big ear, there was nothing I ever had any interest in. It was just, to me, birding was just, I was a teacher. I had a pretty intense job, and I had raised 2 young children. And so it was just a chance to be out in nature, to slow down a bit, to really just enjoy seeing the birds around me, learn more about the birds that were in my yard. Where I was living at the time, there was a vernal pool in my backyard. So it attracted all kinds of migratory birds, and particularly warblers and some ducks. And so I wanted to learn more and more, but I was never a lister beyond keeping track of when did I first see a red-winged blackbird in this particular year, or when I would go to my favorite spot for warblers, what warblers did I see? And then I had one of my daughters got interested as well. We did birding together. I wasn't using eBird or anything like that, or keeping a really extensive list. And that kind of came more with Ethan. He became more of I guess I would say, fanatical birder than I am or was at the time. I think that's probably still true.
That is the identical story to Sue and I. The difference is she has never gotten into that big year spirit like I have. We're doing a lot of birding. She's just not as fanatical as I am, because to her, it's more like you said, Ingrid, I just like to enjoy the birds and enjoy being out in nature. So was it because Ethan did the main big year?
We started out by trying to see how many birds could we see on January, and that was Ethan's first idea. And I was a little hesitant about it because I didn't want to become a big lister or just a bird counter. I just wanted to bird for the sake of enjoying birding. So I had a bit of a conflicted relationship with it because of that. However, when he did his big year in Maine, I did go and do a lot of the birding with him. I don't think I would have seen very much of him if I hadn't, but I do love birds. I love being out birding and being outside. So that was fine. What I didn't love was the long car ride. Sometimes in the car, 5 hours each direction. That part I didn't love, but it was an adventure that he was doing, and I enjoyed being part of it. And as the year progressed, my numbers started really to grow because I was going out so much with him. And it got close to the milestone in Maine of 300, which getting over 300 birds in Maine, it's gotten a little bit easier, but it's really an accomplishment. And I think I was at 293 or 294 on an ash-throated flycatcher, and there were a bunch of other birders there. And somebody who's one of the better birders in Maine said to me, "Doesn't that make about 293 for you?" And I said, "I don't know. That might be right."
You're wondering, how does this guy know this?
And immediately said, "Not that anyone's counting." He's one of the eBird reviewers for the state. He said, have you thought about trying for 300? And I said, there's no way, because this was mid-November. But the way things broke, I was able to get 302 for that year.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. It was social events, too, in a way, and you see a lot of other birders. One of the things we missed doing our big year was seeing our Maine birding friends, because any bird could count anywhere. Where it didn't matter. It didn't have to be a bird in Maine. It just had to be in the lower 48, and we were obviously traveling a lot. Part of my interest in doing a big year was the traveling. I hadn't been very far west in the country, and I was looking forward to seeing places I hadn't seen and just experiencing different cultures within the country. So that was all part of the draw for me, not just seeing the birds, but seeing the country.
That's a very nice way to go about a big year.
Yeah, that was never our goal to break a record. I think I wouldn't have been on board with that because it just would have been too much pressure, too intense. It was intense enough as it was. That said, would I go back and do it all again? I don't have any regrets having done it. It was a lot of fun, and there are definitely things that I miss. I think we both miss about it, but we're also enjoying being at home too and not being constantly traveling.
Ethan, let's get back to your personal goals during the Maine Big Year. Did you actually go into it thinking I'm going to try and break the Maine Big Year record?
Absolutely.
That's not what you told me.
I know you weren't supposed to say that, but
Yeah.
No, I had that plan drawn up, and I remember sometime in about April, I ran into the gentleman that held the record, and he looked at me and said, "Well, what exactly is your goal?" And I said, the record I think was 317. I said, maybe 318. And he started laughing. He said, "I knew it."
It's interesting how sometimes you don't necessarily want to early on, especially that's the fact that you're doing a big year, because there's always a chance that the person whose record you're going to break is going to get a little keen that year and try and break his own record and not let you break the record.
That's right. And that's always a risk. But I think one of the advantages of letting people know that you're really going all out is they pick up the phone and call. For instance, we mentioned a rough earlier. One of the top birders and eBird reviewers in the state had a rough sitting in a dairy farm, and they didn't want a whole bunch of people descending on the dairy farm to get the rough, but he told me about it. And there were a number of things like that where somebody in down East Maine, which is a term for the very northern part of the state, and had a painted bunting on there. And she called me up, and I did a U-turn in the middle of Portland, Maine, and drove straight for 5 hours to get there. And that wouldn't have happened unless I broadcast it.
It's a different world now in terms of the amount of people that are birding and people doing big years and the cooperation from the entire birding community to help everyone, even if they're your competitor.
Absolutely. And there were people, big year we did last year, we were constantly talking to other people that were doing big years and saying, "How did you get on this bird? Where do you go here? Hey, this bird is here." It's a competition, but it's very friendly. The movie makes it appear very cutthroat. It really isn't.
Somebody helps you one time with one bird, you help them with another bird another time. So I think everybody benefits.
What I find is incredibly amazing about birding, even when it's a competition, it still lets all root for each other.
Exactly.
In Maine, the winters can be pretty bad. So were you on some icy, scary, snowy, zero visibility roads from time to time?
Actually, during the winter, most of the birding is along the coast. And for the most part, the roads were always pretty good. The big year we did last year, we had a lot of snowy incidents that were scary. But in the main big year, not really. There were times during the summer when I was going down our two-track and the bottom of my car got stuck and I had to fight my way back out to the road, etc. on it. But really in the winter was never really terribly bad.
He had an SUV, a Subaru Crosstrek, that he drove for his main big year. We had a Subaru Outback. These are fairly high clearance vehicles, four-wheel drive, and certainly he had some good tires on it. He put 60,000 miles on that car during his big year, but he also had a full-size spare in his car because there are places that are pretty remote in Maine, not in the snowy season, but in the summer. There are certain roads you go on looking for three-toed woodpeckers, example, and you get a flat, you're in trouble.
Yes.
You better be able to take care of it yourself because you're not going to get any help for a while. Yeah.
I seem to have this ability to drive off the road when it's covered in snow and think it's flat when there's a ditch 3 feet off the road. And
Ouch.
the scariest one was in Newfoundland. I had gone past the fire station where behind it was supposed to have been a adult male king eider, and I realized that I had to turn around. So I just made what I thought was a normal U-turn, and my rental car slid down into the ditch, and only by being able to steer ever so delicately at the very end avoided actually hitting the telephone pole. To me, those are some of the scariest times. I also decided to enjoy your state as I was coming back from the East Coast in Canada, and there's an old highway that leads up to the Quebec border.
Are you referring to the airline route? I think that's what they call it.
It was getting dark and I was camping in my car. I should have just said, I don't want to drive at night. And as I'm driving, there's a moose in the ditch. As I was braking, it decided it was going to run into the road anyway. Its back end still hit the driver's side bumper, slid all the way up, cracked the windshield, and ran off into the woods. And
You're
I
very
was
lucky.
Since that's where you live, is that a constant worry for you?
We live in the southern part of the state, and I probably see 1 or 2 moose a year down here, but you go up north where you were, and it's a constant problem. We almost hit one when we went up to get the three-toed woodpecker that Ingrid talked about. We came around the corner during the middle of the day on the dirt road, and it walked in front of us, and I just happened to hit the brakes fast enough. And then I got out the camera, we took photos of it, etc. And then you kindly walked away. But at nighttime, you hear stories of people, and they're standing right in the middle, and if you hit them on the side, they roll right into your windshield.
So as you were getting closer to breaking the record, were you chasing more and more at the end of the year, or were you already close enough to the record?
I'm trying to remember the date I broke the record.
It's early November.
November 7th, and broke it, and I think ended up getting another 8 birds after that, but they were all pretty rare birds. The last bird of the year and was just incredible. I got in the second to last bird like the second day of December, and I really thought I was pretty much done. And then on the 30th of December, I got a call saying there's a stellar sea eagle in Georgetown, Maine, about 10 miles from your house. And this was maybe at 3:30 at the end of December, so it was getting dark in Maine already. Ingrid and I rushed down there. We may have broken a speed limit or two, and we got down there, and there were a handful of other birders, and we walked all around the point where it had been seen. We knocked on some doors, but we didn't find it. We were going to have company on New Year's Day, so Ingrid was doing some cooking, and I called a bunch of friends, and we set up a plan on where we were going to get the stellar sea on the last day of the year. And I was down on this peninsula not far from our house, and I must have seen a dozen bald eagles, but no stellar sea eagle. And I'm at the very end of the point, and I get a phone call from a high school kid that is a very good birder, and he says, I'm on it. And I said, send me a pin. And I was 1 mile away from the bird as the crow flies. But it took me like 40 minutes to get there in the car. I swung by the house, picked up Ingrid, and we drove like crazy. And as we got close to it, I started getting calls from friends saying, okay, this is where the bird is. There's going to be a whole bunch of cars parked there. Just drive right past them, and we're holding a parking space up here for you. I drove right up, and there was my parking space, and we could see the bird while still in the car, and the whole Maine birding community was there. They all knew I was doing a big year, and there were hugs and kisses and high fives, and it was just a remarkable way to end the big year. Just remarkable. The rarest bird probably ever seen in Maine.
I don't know how much of my story, but when I was doing my Canada Big Year in 2022, in the winter, I was in Quebec looking for a bird in a horrible snowstorm, and it was starting to get dark. And you talk about the community. I got 2 texts, an email, and a phone call that it was in Bouctouche, New Brunswick. And now I'm thinking, how am I going to get there the fastest? And I thought, if I fly, that's going to be getting to an airport, getting a ticket, getting the flight, renting a car, and that might take longer than driving. So I looked at the map. Oh, it's only 7 hours. Okay, I can do that overnight. And of course, I'm driving through a blizzard, whiteouts. I got to the first place that had a hotel. I stayed there. I got up at 5 in the morning. I get there and I'm getting texts and messages because everybody knew what I was up to and telling me where it's been seen as I'm driving. And as soon as I get to the spot, it flew off 10 minutes ago.
Oh.
Now we're just all spending the day driving around. It's about 2:30 and I sent Sue a text saying, I think I'm going to cry. This was my fourth time spending a lot of money to get this bird. And then around 3:30, someone spotted it. A bunch of us drove over and there's now 40 people all in one spot looking at the bird. We finally all got it. And it was, like you said, a party. Everyone was just so joyful. And for me, I felt like it was the best day ever. So I can understand the amazement and just the camaraderie of all those birders together, seeing a bird that was so special, especially as the last bird of the year.
Bird of the year with just hours left in the year. It was just amazing.
Now, with all the lumps and splits, there's always a discrepancy with what on eBird versus what you did during that year. So what it says on eBird, is that the same number?
The record when I said it was 324. The lump of the red pole brought it down to 323. And the place I saw the ringneck pheasant, they don't allow that to be counted. So I've actually lost 2 birds. Everybody else behind me lost 2 birds as well. I took a lot of photos of Corey Shearwaters that year, and I'm still going through photos and I'm trying to find a Scopoli, and so that would be a split.
I saw my Corey's near the end of the year, and there was no split at the time, so I just went with Corey's because regardless, it's a bird. I was in Newfoundland on a hillside in Cape Race at a lighthouse. I got it in the scope, and I just kept following it, picking out every field mark I could as I'm watching, because there was no way I was going to get a photo of it. Noted every field mark, every behavior, so that when I went back and checked the field guides, I was confident that's the bird I saw. But that's an issue when it's something a bit rare, but you don't get a picture. What is your way of making sure that when you're looking at a bird that you know you're not going to get a picture of, just making sure that you have the right description and the right details?
We play it off against each other. Ingrid and I will talk it through. What did you see? What did I see? Because most of the time we're birding together, and we do make a really strong effort to get a photo, even if it's a really crappy photo.
We can get a recording of its call or song. Otherwise, we talk it through. What were the standout features that convinced us that it was this species and not that one? And
did we both hear it? What did we both hear? How does it compare to what Merlin says we heard?
Oh, by the way, the bird that I flew back from British Columbia to see in Ontario was the marsh sandpiper. I don't know if you've had the same sort of knot in the stomach anxiety when you're on one side of the country and something like a marsh sandpiper shows up and what's going to take you 12 hours or whatever to get there. My stomach was churning the entire flight. I paid for Wi-Fi so I could keep up with the reports. That was another case, like you said, where the birding community made sure that they would have someone there to escort me to the spot, to make sure that I had somewhere to park and get in. I don't know how much that's changed since the Sandy Comito big year, how many more people are involved and how...
I don't think there's any question. Like, while we were doing the big year last year, we were listening to an interview with Comito, and he was talking about once he had heard about a rare bird, he didn't stop. He didn't sleep. He didn't stop to eat. He'd stop to go to the bathroom and just keep moving. Yeah, and we didn't do that.
Yeah, for the marsh sandpiper, stopping for Sue was against the rules, but like you did picking up Ingrid, there's some things you just have to do.
Don't even bother coming home if I didn't pick her up.
It didn't hurt that it was only about 30 seconds out. We had to drive right by our road anyway.
There you go. So now you've planned on doing the Lower 48 big year or some sort of biggish big year. Was that a result of watching the movie again, or had you just from doing the main big year thought, now I want to do something bigger?
I think we had actually been talking about doing a big year since about 2015 and how it would actually happen. The main big year came along. I'm 4 years older than Ingrid. She had an age she wanted to retire at. I was probably planning to retire 3 years before her at some point. And I think I asked her, how would you feel about me doing a main big year? And she was incredibly supportive of it. But we had always talked that in 2025, this year, we had actually planned on doing maybe a big year of some type. And we decided to move it up for a year simply because you
I retired a year earlier than I planned to. So we thought we'll just move that up a year. And it turned turned out well that we did, because we've had a number of challenges that since January of this year that would have made it difficult to be doing the big year. In hindsight, it's a really good thing we did it when we did. I think we would have had to shelf it.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's something we had talked about for a long time. We weren't sure exactly what region we were going to do. And for quite a while, we thought about doing the full ABA. But then we decided that was just maybe going to be a little bit too much time away from home and just a little too intense. So we decided to do the lower 48, which worked a lot better.
Lower 48 big ears have become very popular in recent years, from Tiffany Kirsten doing it almost accidentally to the Stoll brothers and the young man who wiped out the big ear record.
Hello, I've come back from the future and am sitting in a park on a picnic table doing my editing when I realized that we did not tell you who the gentleman was that broke the big ear record for the lower 48. His name was Ezekiel Dobson, who had 757 species. Hopefully we'll be talking to him in a future episode, but I'll send you back to the past. Thank you.
When we met him, we'd been texting with him for most of the year on birds, but we actually met him on Long Island chasing, what were we chasing? Just drawing a blank here.
Yeah.
Northern Whitaker. When we met him, he was flying from the West Coast into New York City, and we were driving down and taking the ferry across Long Island Sound to get to the bird.
So yes, he did do some flying and more driving, and he slept in his car a lot, and he would do DoorDash in the evening, sometimes makes money for gas money. And
I do the same thing.
Yeah, give him a lot of credit. He piled a lot of energy into that. Just long, like 17-hour straight drives from one side of the country to almost the other side.
Yeah, and do it over and over.
Which is our approach.
Speaking of your approach, you had a novel approach to planning the big ear. There are two types of big ear birders. There's the ones like me who just jump into it and do it and adapt plans along the way. And they're the ones that do spreadsheets and make airline flights ahead of time and have all the eBird records for the last 20 years. You did something a little bit different because you were a software engineer.
Right. There's an awful lot of data on eBird right now, and I wrote some computer modeling that basically said try to get every code 1 and code 2 bird in the country and come up with a plan to actually move across the country, at least in the first half of the year, in a car and try to get as many of those code 1s as code 2s as possible. Second half of the year, fly to individual places, continue to go after code 1 and code 2s. And with that approach is turning the Sandy Comito idea of always chase the rarities on its head, that if you went after all the code 1s and code 2s, the code 3s, 4s, and 5s would generally be in those general areas, and you could pick those up at the same time. Honestly, I think we were shooting for maybe 600 birds for the year using this approach, and we were going to stop and see the world's biggest ball of twine while we drove across the country casually. Of course, that didn't happen. We went after all the birds we could.
Yeah.
But the approach of going after the common birds and the rare ones take care of themselves, it sounds crazy, but it worked. So,
And we didn't get every rare bird that was appearing in the country with that. We wouldn't drop what we were doing, get on a plane and fly somewhere just for one bird. We could pretty much stuck to our plan. And sometimes we got lucky. There would be more rare birds would come into wherever we were than we were expecting. We ended up adding one trip in toward the end of the year when it looked like we could reach 700. We decided we would go back. We're like, where could we get some more birds? And when we had been in Colorado in April, we were on a tight time schedule, and we missed a lot of birds that you could get in Colorado then. So we decided we'll go back to Colorado, and then we decided we would also add in going into Arizona, because at the time we made the plan, there were a couple of birds being seen then. By the time we got to Colorado, they had disappeared. So we really thought we were going to be making that trip into Arizona for nothing. But as it turned out, we got to Colorado, there was a yellow-billed loon just over the border into Wyoming. So we drove up and got that before we did the Colorado birds. And while we were in Colorado, more rare birds came into, or or birds that we didn't have came into Arizona. So in fact, we got off the plane in Phoenix, drove to a botanical park, and got 2 rare birds in the same tree.
Wow.
Just before the park
That was
closed.
amazing. Yeah.
So we had some luck there, but there was definitely a lot of strategy involved too. And fortunately, a lot of the birds stayed put for a while. The really rare ones, like the cattle tyrant in Texas, stayed there for a while. It took us a long time to get it, but the yellow-headed Cara is still being seen in Florida. But we did miss. Probably one regret we have is that we didn't spend more time in California.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a few more pelagic trips off the coast of Washington State and California would have been good. And then just being there longer or going out there a second time during the course of the year, we would have some more birds. But we were really happy with how we did. We never expected we would get anywhere near the number of birds that we did.
That's a dilemma, I guess, for some people that if I can't break the record, why bother doing a big year? And the aspect of just saying, I'm going to do my big year and have a nice, modest approach to it and not think of records. When you do that, you end up doing a lot of times better than you would have ever thought because you haven't put any pressure on yourself. Did you have that sort of attitude, especially toward the end of the year?
We actually had plane tickets scheduled the day after Christmas to go back down to Florida. And some of the birds that we were going to chase there disappeared. And at first we were disappointed, and then we went, yeah, we're good. And it was about the only time all year that we had bought cancelable tickets. And
yeah, because we had a feeling that might happen.
Yeah.
We had a rule at that point. We never got on a plane for one bird. And the rule was there had to be 3. And if it got down to 2, okay, we still would have gone because maybe something else would have shown up that we didn't have. But when it got to be 0, then we said, okay, this is silly because we'll just be frustrated. Had been in Texas around Thanksgiving time, and we almost stayed there a little too long. We thought there would be more birds for us then, and we ran out of birds pretty quickly. But yet it was because it was Thanksgiving. We thought about getting on a plane in Houston and going to Florida and picking up some of the birds there then, but we couldn't make any changes to anything because it was Thanksgiving. There had been some weather events that had canceled lots of flights, and it was just a nightmare flight-wise and too far to drive. So we didn't want to do the same thing again. You just go down and spend this time in Florida, the money to do it, and just be having no new birds, ending the year feeling frustrated. So we decided we'll be satisfied with what we have. And
we did a lot of decisions about the 1 bird versus the 5 bird thing. The 2 big year birds that are classics that people have to get, the Kalima Warbler and the snowcocks. We made decisions not to chase those birds because they're challenging birds to get, long hikes and those types of things. And we imagined traveling to get to those birds, hitting weather and being stuck. And we just said that's not what we want to do. And I think it worked pretty much because we were able to getting to 700 birds 10 years ago was in the ABA region was just incredible. If you got to 700, that was a real achievement. And we were able to do it in the lower 48. 1, on computer modeling, but 2, it's frankly just gotten easier with eBird and the splits.
eBird and social media. There's a lot of group me's and just we were looking for lovebirds in Phoenix and we couldn't find them. We had eBirds reports, we couldn't find them. And I went on to Facebook and I found this group called Phoenix is for Lovebirds. And someone had posted where to find lovebirds in Phoenix. And we went there the next morning and we found them. Social media certainly helped.
Was that in Canto Park?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
They're really cute to watch. There's a number of them and they're all either sitting out in the trees kissing or they're down in the ground and feeding each other.
They're adorable.
There's not that many birds that you can just enjoy watching birds doing what birds do. So you were talking about that in Maine you didn't have any extreme driving experiences, but during your lower 48 big year, you must have had an adventure or 2.
One thing we knew that the mountains in the west were bigger than the mountains here on the east coast where we live. But we didn't really think through a lot of what that meant for driving. We hadn't really experienced a lot of these switchback roads and just really steep drop-offs that you can encounter out there. So we had dealt with that more than we would have liked to. But probably the most famous of those trips for us was in Portal, Arizona.
I know it well.
Yeah, we went to see these Mexican chickadees, and the road up there was Oh my gosh, we almost turned back, but we figured we've come this far and we'll keep on going. And it was quite difficult to traverse some places, and also, again, these steep drop offs. And
Yes.
we got there, we got the chickadees, and we're about to head back down. And I was going to take over driving because Ethan has more issues with dealing with the panic of these. Are we going to fall off the side of this road and end up in the canyon below?
I'm basically a coward. Yeah.
So I took over driving, and we were at this area where it said there you can go back 6 miles to Portal or 3 miles this way to Paradise. And I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. Let's go through 3 miles to Paradise.
I know what's coming next.
Yeah, it was way worse than the 6 miles that we turned around and gone the 6 miles back to Portal. And we had to go across like 3 streams.
3 streams.
And it was just, we got to this one point where there was we were on the right hand side of the road, and there's a steep drop off, and there's another SUV coming up around the curve.
I was in that exact spot. I know exactly where you were.
We actually could fold in the mirrors on our car, thankfully. And then, but it was still, I was like, I wanted them to get a little closer to the mountainside, so that, because if anyone was going to end up being dead, it was us. Because we were going to fall into the canyon below. And it just as close as you could possibly get to another car. We inched by this car.
I'm on the passenger side looking out. I can't see land.
Yeah, I don't know what we just got to hope. So yeah, we really weren't prepared for that. And some of the driving in, same kind of thing through the Rockies and places, and then in Utah.
And we went up to get the rosy finches in San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. That was just a little warm up compared to the other.
And we had a snowstorm up at the top. Pretty extraordinary, actually. So many birds.
And so during the big year, did you every bird you saw, you both saw on the same trips, or did you one of you have to pick up a bird that you missed on another occasion?
No, fortunately, we're able to both see everything. There were times like I might be looking in this direction and he'd see the bird and it would have flown away, but fortunately it came back. Yeah. We worried about that a little bit, like
how would we deal with it?
What would we do? But
the closest we got to it was on the dry tortugas. What was the turn that you got? And
the bridal turn.
The bridal turn, yeah. You had a bridal turn, and I didn't get it. And it was close to us having to get back on the boat, and we finally got me on it.
I had seen it flying, and he hadn't seen it, and there's just so many birds in the air there. Hard time finding it. But again, this is the value of talking to people. When we were in Hayes, Kansas, at the Prairie Chicken Festival, we met another birder from Maine, who we had never met before in Maine, and he had been to the Dry Tortugas just like a week or two before, and he told us exactly where to find the nest of the bridal terns, and I wrote it all down. So I pulled out my notes, and they said, go here, stand here, look down. I mean, it was really tricky. We had to hold on to something, and sure enough, we looked over the cement wall, and there they were, and that's how we were able to get me another look and get him a look. It really is a good idea to network with people, talk to people, because you never know what valuable information they'll share with you, and then you can also help them if they're looking for something.
Was there a bird that the networking was the reason you got it?
The yellow-headed caracara.
Yellow-headed caracara.
We had spent over 4 different days, about 23 hours looking for this bird on, 3 different trips there?
3 or 4, yeah.
And we had spent 7 hours that day staring at these dumpsters at the state park in Miami.
And it was 100 degrees. It was awful.
And high humidity. And we were taking turns going to the different pavilions and looking at the trash cans where the bird might also come.
Living a dream, I tell you.
We finally said, okay, we were on a flight out the next morning, and we had to drive across the state. And I was like, we got to go. And we had exchanged each other's phone numbers so that if somebody saw it while we were there, we could text each other. We hadn't been in the car, 15 minutes? And he called us and said, it's here. And we just decided, okay, we got to go. It was starting to get dark, and we had to beg them to let us back in the park because it was going to be closed in 15 minutes. And these people had since left, but I was like, all right, I'll stand and look this way. You stand and look that way. And just as they were literally around gathering up people to leave the park, saying, you've got to go, the park is closing, it flew in over our heads. So if it hadn't been for them contacting us and saying it's here, and as simple as exchanging, sometimes it feels awkward saying to people, you want to exchange numbers so that if I see it or you see it, we can let each other know. We did that a number of times, and quite a few times it paid off for us or for somebody else. So that's a bird that we had a lot of time invested in and a lot of frustration trying to get.
And they were Canadians.
There you go. Good old Canadians were friendly to a fault, so they say. What was the furthest you ever went for one bird?
Oh, okay, like a trip or something for one bird.
A long drive for a bird?
I think it was probably Cara. We kept going back for it, crossing the state of Florida over and over again.
Yeah, although the peninsula there at the tip is not. It's just a couple hours across from the west coast to the east coast. Oh, probably the red-flanked bluetail early in the year.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
It was in New Jersey. I think January 3rd, we drove from Maine to New Jersey. That's a fairly long drive to get there. Trip we hadn't planned, but that bird had been there since November, and we were amazed it was still there. So we drove down and got that, and it turned out to be a good trip because along the way we got some other gulls that are hard.
We got a common gull,
some geese and swans in Connecticut and in New Jersey. Yeah, so that turned out to be a really good trip. But I think that might be the furthest sort of impromptu drive we did to get that. We did some long drives as we were traveling back across the country because we had to be in certain places at certain dates because we were going to the Gunnison Sage Grouse Festival, and then we were going to the Prairie Chicken Festival, and we had to take some pretty long drives.
The Greater Sage Grouse was a better of a drive to get up there for the Hannaford Black Camp. That was
we hadn't had a plan to get a greater sage grouse. It didn't seem like thought it was going to be difficult. But then I found this information in some Audubon Society had published in Utah about this lek right along the side of the road in Hannaford, Utah. So we did work that in. It was a ways out of our way to get up there, but it was fantastic. We had one of our most unique and wonderful birding experiences was that Hannaford lek. Starting to get light, you start to see the grouse arriving. In fact, we got there, I think it was about 4 a.m., and it was pitch black, and we stopped and we turned off the car and we're waiting to see they were already, as your eyes adjusted, you could see there were already a few grouse there. They were all right around our car and they were so close, and it spoiled us for the Gunnison sage grouse and the lesser and greater prairie chickens that were much further away when we saw them.
Sandy Comito got stuck in the mud in his Ford Taurus, driving in the pitch black and sleeping in the car for that bird, and I had to get a farmer to winch out of the mud.
Wow. Fortunately, we never got into any real issues with driving, thankfully, or into those predicaments like you were describing with moose.
Yeah, we were very lucky that way.
So what are some of the advantages and perhaps disadvantages of being a couple and birding together? Are there times where you want to make different decisions and there's some discussion, or were you always on the same page?
I think we did a lot of negotiating. When does going here? When does it make going there? And we both would listen to each other's opinion, then I'd do whatever Ingrid said. No, I'm teasing.
You have to make compromises. I think Ethan would always be out the door if it was up to him earlier in the morning than I would be. And I do not like really long drives. So we could limit. Once in a while, we would do an 8 or 9 hour drive, but very rarely. Most of the time, it was try to do it in 6 hours or less. So those kinds of things you have to work out. What are your limits? What are you willing to do and not do? But for the most part, I think it just had to be. We both had to make compromises, I think, at times and say, okay, all right, I'll deal with an occasional really long drive here or there.
But there's so many advantages of doing this as a couple. I wrote an app that constantly pulled eBird and put the various birds we didn't have on a map on a phone. And I did most of the driving except in the mountains where I get freaked out. And Ingrid would constantly be looking at the app and saying, oh, there's a Ross's goose 2 miles from here. And we'd say, Ross's goose, that's worth getting off the road for.
Yeah, I have to say that app gave us a huge advantage. I could search the county we were in. I could even put a parameter on it, like within 5 miles, what birds, and it would show just the birds we didn't have yet for the year. So it did a lot of that sort of background legwork that would take a tremendous amount of time for you to do on your own. There was a computer that was doing it. So we got a lot of birds that way. And the other thing is we have different skills. First of all, there's an advantage. You have 2 sets of eyes and ears looking for a bird. birds. And then you have we're on pelagic trips. I tend to spot a lot of birds, like way off at the horizon or just even close by. I can spot the birds more quickly than he can, but he can identify them faster than I can. Those combinations of you're playing to each other's strengths.
And you both have different enough skills that it meshes very well, it seems. What about in terms of identifying by sound? Does one of you have the advantage there?
She's much better at identifying by sound, but my hearing is much better than hers.
For high pitch.
Yeah.
Pitch birds.
The brown creepers or Blackburnians, she has trouble hearing.
Yeah.
And,
Cedar waxing. For high pitch birds, he'll notice where I do. I may not notice at all.
The other thing we did is we always birded together. I know there's a very famous birding couple from Florida that when they go to a place, they split and then they call each other back in. We never did that. We were always right together, but we would be looking in different directions and stuff. We were
a few feet away, but not far, within calling distance.
Calling distance.
Yeah.
What was the rarest bird you saw and the one that got away?
The rarest bird is probably the mottled owl. The Rio Grande in Texas. That was a night trip that we on Santa Margarita Ranch, which is an incredible place for birds. You have to go there with a guide. So we did that one evening, and then the next day we went on another guided trip during the daytime for brown jays and rose-throated card and more like seed eater. We came away that day with 104 different species just from that 6 hours on the ranch.
And for those your listeners that don't know, the ranch is located right along the Rio Grande, and you have to actually go through the border wall. But the border wall is a mile from the Rio Grande. So you have this almost surreal thing where you show up in the dark with this enormous wall, Game of Thrones type wall sitting there. And you go through it, and then you walk through the woods for a half mile or a mile, and then you start looking for the owl.
And that may be the one that got away story too, the bare-throated tiger heron that had been really reliable every day that those trips ran. And the day we were there, for some reason, we searched and searched all along the river with the guides. The only thing that anyone could think of was an extremely hot day. Even though it was late February, it was like 95 degrees. And perhaps the bird just stayed tucked away to stay cool. And we had looked for it again. We had a total of 3 trips to Texas, and we had looked for it again. Another time we were there when it was still being seen, we went to Salinenia, which is just about a half mile from there. No tiger heron. So that's probably the one that...
Actually, I'd probably say it's the three-toed woodpecker.
Oh, the three-toed woodpecker was the frustrating too. But we both have seen a three-toed woodpecker. The bare-throated tiger heron would be another life bird.
For us.
And I think we were pretty certain we were going to see that bird, and we didn't. But it was always going to be one like that.
Always.
And we were fortunate to see other birds like the fantail warbler in Texas that people had some trouble tried to see and didn't. Or the large-billed tern in Florida. We know people that had made multiple trips to try to see that, and we drove up and there it was. So sometimes you get really lucky and you get a bird like that right away, and other times it's like the yellow-headed carra that you spend hours and finally get, or a bird that you're pretty sure you're going to get and then you don't. So that's all part of the fun of it.
If every bird you chased and got to was always there, you would start taking rare birds for granted.
Sure.
And sometimes the 3-hour day in the rain is much more rewarding when you finally see the bird at sunset.
If you always got to be like going to Walmart to pick up a sleeping bag. Yeah, okay.
Whatever, yeah.
Did you have to go to dumps for gulls?
Oh, yeah. Brownsville dump. You were looking for?
Oh, we were looking for raven. And
yes.
Pretty nasty.
Did you get the Tamaulipas crow while you were there?
We did later, but not there.
We've had to go for the white wagtail along this Los Angeles River, and the river was really hot and kind of not a lovely...
little smelly, but
spot. But yeah, sewage treatment plants. There's a lot of food there for birds. They take advantage of it, yeah. But sometimes you're in really incredible, beautiful places. Some areas of Arizona are just stunning when the desert's in bloom. And
what was the one place that you would never have gone to without doing a big ear that made a big impression on you?
Salton Sea.
Been there before.
Well, we'd gone there to bird.
Yeah, probably Utah. Neither of us had been, for me anyway, neither of us had ever been there. And it's just a very unique landscape there that made a big impression on me in terms of just all of the rock formations and the color of the rock. the different monoliths at Arches National Park, which we took some time to go there. And the country is so vast and it's so different in various parts of the country. It was from Pacific Northwest is just breathtakingly beautiful. The Southwest is as well. We love the Northeast and just the beauty of being on the rugged coast of Maine. But there's so much else to see in the country. And I feel very fortunate that we were in, I think, 37 or 38 states. Many of those are states that I had never been to before. And just grateful to have had the chance to see and meet a lot of people. We talked to just a lot of people who were not birders, who were staying in the hotel we were, and just strike up conversation with them over dinner. Gives you a broader perspective. And yeah.
It sounds all very exciting, but the most exciting thing sometimes is how you celebrate a lifer. And for me, it's a steak dinner. I started that with the California condor. I went out for a steak dinner after and have been doing that ever since. And I know you have a celebration as well. Tell us about that and how it got started.
Well, there's lifer pie, which is the tradition. But I think when we got to Zaxxon Bog, when I think we had 3 lifers the first day there, and Ingrid said, "Where are you going to get a lot of lifers this year? We're not going to be able to have pie every single time." So I think we called that off at that point because I think I had 200 lifers during the year and Ingrid
That's
had
a lot of pie.
Yeah, 212.
But yeah, we don't have a specific tradition about celebrating a lifer other than just a high five, maybe.
Maybe a kiss, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and you two are very well matched, especially in your storytelling. You hand off to each other very well, which I am not very good at. I appreciate that. Any plans? You said you don't regret your big ear, but you are glad you did it. Any plans for any kind of other future birding now that you've got that out of your system?
We want to do a little more traveling. I think we were talking this morning, we went and chased a bird, nothing special, but some white-crowned sparrows, which are rare in Maine, we went over to get them. And on the way back, we were talking about, let's look into going to Hawaii and doing a little birding because they're very special.
Yeah, we did not go there as part of the big year, but just such individual trips, maybe been to Central or South America, which we haven't been to, done birding there, which is an incredible place for birds.
We've been to Panama, Ecuador, and as much as I love birding the ABA area and prioritize my ABA list, those places are just incredible. And I saw a bare-throated tiger heron on one of them.
Now we can get our bare-throated tiger heron in.
So,
in another way.
Canopy Tower.
Yes, we stayed there.
We have to go there and stuff. You stayed there. Wow.
Yes. If you're going to be there, you got to stay in Canopy Tower because it's just neat. And then you get up in the morning and you have breakfast and you just stand out on the platform. And because you're right up in the treetops, you're just seeing so many incredible birds. So yeah.
Fantastic.
That was Sue's research. She does all the research to find the places that we're going. I am not allowed to do any of the planning because my planning involves getting in the car and driving. And if I have to sleep in the car, I sleep in the car. She don't want to do any of that.
I'm with her on that.
I've been perusing your book. What's the title?
Every Bird from Sea to Shining Sea. It's an homage to Woody Guthrie's famous song.
Very nice. It's got a lot of great pictures, a lot of great stories, and take care. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'm back home sitting in my front yard, listening to yard birds as I wrap up yet another episode. Look forward to a hot, humid summer of birding in July and August. Thanks once again for joining me with Ethan and Ingrid. I do enjoy talking to couples as you get a wider perspective on the big year, and I love how they sometimes complete each other's sentences or defer to the other when one's memory fails them. I wish I had someone to defer to. All that happens with me is I have to edit out a lot of dead air. And if you enjoyed this episode even half as much as I did, then, well, I got to enjoy it twice as much as you. Next month, we'll be venturing back in time to the year 2012 and returning to Ontario. At the beginning of that year, I was a 51-year-old, less than novice birder, and had started an ABA big year on a wing and a prayer. My guest, however, not even half my age at the time, was an experienced and knowledgeable birder and was setting out on his Ontario big year. It ended up being a battle worthy of Ken Kaufman and Lloyd Murdoch's big year back in 1973. Suffice it to say, my guest, Andrew Keevanen, played the part of Ken Kaufman. During the course of 2012, I got to know Andrew very well and often was able to follow up on his finds and get birds I may not otherwise have seen. Well, once again, I wish I could thank each and every one of you personally for listening. You could do me a big favor, however, by following, subscribing, liking, and commenting wherever it is you listen to my voice over the ethereal land of podcasts. Also, please tell all your birding friends and family to come have a listen, won't you? Until next time, I hope you enjoy your summer of birding at least half as much as I will. Well, you know the rest.
I dropped my phone. It's like an earthquake on your end.
I wish I had someone to defer to when my memory fails me. All that happens is I have to edit out lots of empty space. During the course of 2012, I got to know Andrew during the year, and that's silly. This batch of perhaps bachelor penguins, birding couple from Maine, Edith and Ethan Whitaker. Edith and let me try that again, because it's a tough one to say. A birding couple from Maine. Eden, they got two in the name. Enough of me now. Well, enough of me.